Hey everyone, welcome to episode 7 of Super Average People. It's been 3 months since my last episode. I can't believe that, but I'm so excited to finally be getting another one out. You know, it's funny because I'm releasing this episode at the same time that a lot of the world has gone into social isolation because of a pandemic, as you would know about. And also just a couple of months after the Australian bushfire crisis. And you know, we're only in March of 2020. So yeah, epic times. And I mean, it's got me reflecting on, I just feel like this episode couldn't be like, it's such an abstract topic you would think, but then it's actually so fitting for right now. You know, we really see our systems, I guess, collapsing around us and just seeing that they're not really serving us anymore. And, you know, just like, you know, people are fighting over toilet paper and going out and hoarding stuff from the shops and you know, what do you expect though from a society that already has such a strong scarcity mentality that we already leave our vulnerable behind? And what do you expect from a society or a culture that you know, its very ethos is built on the concept of every man for himself? You know, what do you expect then when a crisis like this shows up? You know, this is domination of nature, domination of each other, and this is a masculine trait. So what happens when we're faced with a crisis, that particularly one that's arisen because of the very systems that we've created, or even a natural crisis that is made worse because of the systems that we have created? We look to the same systems to exude feminine qualities that we need during a crisis, such as community, trust, looking after the vulnerable, nurture. But you know, these feminine qualities have not been built into our society's fabric. And so now we see our society's fabric falling apart because we have only honoured the masculine traits of this. You know, I often just imagine a world where we really empower our women to be able to go out into the world and offer up these gifts of femininity into the world, of trust, community, intuition, nurture. I'm not talking about putting women in jobs, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about bringing these gifts into the world of femininity. But, you know, like, how can we do that when so many of us are out of touch with these parts of ourselves? But never fear, because Jess is on it. She's today's super average person, and she's working on just bringing the feminine back. And she's not only doing this as being an amazing role model to other women, of what it is just to step into who you truly are and bringing that into the world, but also showing what vulnerability is and why that is so important. And yeah, just saying no to this top-down patriarchal methods that we have built into our systems, and she's holding space for women to come, to heal, and to then go forth into the world. So I hope you enjoy this episode.
My name is Jess. I am a mum and I live in Toowoomba, Queensland. I have a little 2-year-old girl, and I've recently started a business called Dorothy Way, which brings in my psychology, as well as a more holistic alternative look at the world and people. Okay. So I grew up in southwest Queensland on a sheep and cattle property. Very like nuclear kind of family, just like our family on a fairly remote property. It was gorgeous. We were really in touch with nature, and that's something that I've definitely carried with me today. I went to an all-girls boarding school, which was a massive shock, and really hard for me to adjust to. And then, but in both of those experiences, because of both of those experiences, I was really interested in human behaviour. And so I studied psychology in Brisbane and liked it, didn't love it. I worked in the corporate world, the private world, the like government, health and community sectors, but I couldn't really like find my place within it as a psychologist. So I ended up just leaving Australia and did what every young Australian wants to do or does. And I travelled overseas. Like within that first year, very rapidly had a lot of exposure to great deals of wealth as well as great deals of poverty. And I got interested in international development and humanitarian work. So I did a little bit more study, and I found myself first in the Palestinian territories and then a big chunk of time in Bangladesh working in the international development and humanitarian sector. So I was with the United Nations for about 6 years, and it was incredible. Like it was a very fast-paced, very masculine, very like achievement-driven culture. It was incredibly intense. And I experienced a great deal of burnout there, and realised like that actually that wasn't where I was meant to be. I felt really fulfilled doing that work, but I was really like fulfilled in a way that was just like me as like part of like this momentum, and less like doing work that I actually found meaningful. It felt like it should have been really fulfilling, and it felt like we were all there and we were really committed to a higher goal and that we were saving lives. But really on reflection, I feel like we were intervening in a way where we weren't necessarily welcome. So even though the host country had welcomed us there, it was still quite like a patriarchal, idealistic kind of view that we were putting on the people and the country and the way things operate. The people who are working in that environment are totally sacrificing themselves to work in that environment and to achieve results. And like the rates of burnout and cancer and everything, even within like international professionals within there, that's not a sustainable way of living and operating. And I'm a bit cynical as to whether that top-down approach is really the way that we do help. I really think that helping is about connecting on a one-to-one level, and the more one-to-one connections or like connections with ourselves that we make, then we're going to raise consciousness. My life there was quite toxic on a number of levels. The environment is like heavily polluted, it's overpopulated. It was a challenging place to live. And I'd also fallen into a relationship with a man who I then married. He was kind of like a beacon of salvation for me at that point in time. And he was a local Bangladeshi man. And part of me kind of also idolized that, like it was me becoming part of the culture as opposed to being like the Western person that's just doing the work there. But so we got married, and I knew all along in my gut that it wasn't right. But it was on the first day of our honeymoon, he became physically abusive and sexually abusive, and I stayed in that relationship. Basically because I didn't really feel like I had an out. I was just exhausted, and it felt too hard to fight him as well as continue doing the work that I was doing. And then we were in a terrorist situation and narrowly escaped a terrorist attack. And that was kind of like the catalyst to change the environment. So we decided that we would move to Australia, and he was really supportive of this because on reflection, I can see he wanted his Australian visa. So we moved to Australia, and I was here by myself for the initial part while he was still kind of like packing up his parents at home, or making arrangements for his parents at home. And I found out I was pregnant. And so I was 8 weeks pregnant. And it was like the penny dropped. After that, I realized how much I had put the blinkers on in terms of what was going on in the relationship and how much I was putting up with, and really how deep and degrading it had actually gotten. But it wasn't until I gave birth to Anya, and it was literally that night, like 24 hours after she was born, or 12 hours after she was born, I saw him and it was done. I was like, we are done. And a week and a half, 2 weeks, 10 days, when she was 10 days old, he left. Which was hard, but also like incredibly relieving. I don't really know what to say about that. He's not part of our lives anymore, and it's good. You should always listen to your gut, I would say. I knew from the very beginning that it wasn't right, and I didn't listen to it, and I pushed down what my intuition was telling me. I was pushing down what everything inside of me was telling me, because I thought that I should try. Because society and my family was telling me that I should try to keep the family together, that it would be better for my baby if I kept the family together, that, there's reasons for his behaviour, but really in that I wasn't respecting myself. And I can see that very clearly now, but I know it's really hard when you're in it. But I would just say to any woman that has experienced abuse on any level, that they really check in with themselves. You don't need to find an external source to like validate that. Like, sit with yourself and check in with yourself. And if you know it's not right, it's not right. If you don't make what seems like a tough decision, then you're sacrificing your life. Like, it's better to make those tough decisions and even deal with the ramifications. The ramifications are never going to be as bad as you losing your life to a relationship that is abusive. The birth of Anya was such a gift, right? Like, on so many levels. And it just split me open, and I realized that everything that I was doing before, like my entire life leading up to that moment, was just like a hat or a coat. Like, it was like some layer that I put on myself. I was being someone. I was trying to fit into something. I'd never really sat long enough to work out who I was. Like, I had like the general sense, like I knew who my personality was and kind of what I liked and what I didn't like, kind of what I was interested in. Like that, on the surface level, that was there. But I'd never sat really with myself and gone deep. And I was doing it for her. Like, I was looking at her and realizing how massive that decision that I just made, what a massive impact that would have on her life, and how life can go like in so many different ways and paths, and like we make decisions like this and it really can change the trajectory of our life. And when I looked at it like that, I kind of saw that, to an extent, like this life, it doesn't really matter that much. Like, there's a lot more that's above that or beyond that. It was a lot of months of like sitting with myself, looking at my own behaviour and my habitual kind of patterns, looking even now that I was a mum, I could look at my relationship with my mum and her relationship with her mum, and even beyond that. And I was really getting a sense of all of this intergenerational wounding that we had carried across. And I made the decision that it stopped here. It stopped with me, and I'm getting emotional. And that it wouldn't happen with Anya. And with that, I had this really big desire to share that with other women, and not for other women to be in the position that I had been in, the position that I'd seen like my mother in, and also my grandmother and all of the women that I see around me. I just saw so much potential for life beyond the lives that we lead. And so I birthed Anya, and then I birthed Dorothy Way. I created Dorothy Way, and Dorothy Way is really, in its essence, it's a space for women to be, and it's a space for women to connect with themselves. And in that connection with yourself and connection with other women, connection with the feminine, it's a place for healing. And it really is a place for women to take the opportunity to heal into their own hands. And we do that through women's circles as well as one-on-one sessions. The women's circles, I think, are really beautiful because it's a place where you're not only taking time to reflect on yourself and connecting with yourself, but you're also connecting with like-minded women. And circles are beautiful because you just see yourself reflected in every other woman, and that's inspiring, and that's also really healing. And it's also a place where the collective feminine energy is really apparent, and that is incredibly beautiful. So the circles are really important, and a real foundational part of Dorothy Way. And then I also offer one-on-one sessions, which are not your traditional psychology sessions. There are two of us, but it's really a session that's led by you, and it's a much more holistic approach to wherever you want to take it, really. The work at Dorothy Way is really important because we are living in such a patriarchal paradigm where the values of the masculine energy have been overrepresented. So we see the entire world is running on power, conflict, competition. There's little acknowledgement for the environment. There's little acknowledgement for humanity. There's atrocities happening everywhere. On an individual level, you see men and women also being competitive with each other. You see them focused on logical linear action. We're achievement oriented. We've made massive strides in technology, in the economy, but it's really at the deficit of the environment or the connection with each other. So this overrepresentation of the masculine has happened while we have devalued the feminine, and the traditional feminine qualities, the spiritual feminine qualities of connection and love, nurturance, community, creative expression, sexual expression, choosing pleasure. Those things are things that we consider weak or unnecessary or inefficient. And that's for within a man and within a woman. So we see women are more in their masculine, men are in their masculine, and it's a completely unbalanced world. So drawing on the feminine, I believe, is incredibly important, and it applies at the individual level, it applies at the societal level, it applies at the global level, because if we can balance the feminine with the masculine, then we're on this path to integration, and we're on this path to harmony. And I see with that, we still value what the masculine brings, but we also value just as much what the feminine can bring. And that means that we will know ourselves more, because we haven't suppressed a whole part of ourselves. We would have more connection with ourselves. We'll have more connection with each other. We will have more connection with Mother Earth. And to me, it's the solution to everything. Yeah. I catch myself sometimes, I'm like, because I think this framework applies to everything, to absolutely everything that we do. It applies in the relationships that we have. It applies even into the economy and the way that we run our businesses. Like, I think there's so much potential in using this framework. It's not a simple process accepting the feminine, and it's challenging for a man who's like repressed his emotional side for a long time. It's really challenging for women who have fought really hard to get to this point where we feel like we're becoming more equal, but we actually need to become more vulnerable. We don't need to do everything that a man can do. We don't have to achieve everything. Our role is really to start sitting into our receptivity, into our vulnerability, and allowing, I think. And it's also really important for men and women to realize that this rise of the feminine energy, which is becoming more and more discernible to people, it's not about women becoming as good as men. It's not about the patriarchy becoming a matriarchy. It's really about a partnership model, and about this really, it will always still be like evolving dynamic between the two energies, but it will never be about the men becoming lesser than. The men need to know that they're not losing power in this. They're actually gaining power in this just as much as the women are. So I'm a qualified psychologist. I have increasingly distanced myself from the profession of psychology. I still have respect for it, but it's not a place where I choose to practice from, because it's very heavily embedded within the traditional or the Western medical paradigm, which is very patriarchal. Within that paradigm, you have a professional patient dyad where I'm supposedly the expert on you, which I think is complete bull. Like, no one knows you better than you know you, and you are your own self-healer. Bottom line, you can get so-called experts to come and help guide you, or you can pull on different resources and tools and tricks, but ultimately it comes down to you. But the Western medical system, it doesn't operate like that, and psychology has fought for many, many years to be respected within the Western medical system, and so it became very scientifically rigorous. A lot of the techniques and the tools and the models that we use are based on scientific experiments. So they say, that's once passed so that you can use it. But it takes like medicine, it takes a really reductionist view on you. So if I was a psychologist, then you would come in, you would sit down, and I would look at you and I would look at what's happening in your mind, and it would be diagnosing you with a label saying that you're depressed or you're anxious or you have this or this, and giving you tips or tools on how to deal with that experience that you're having. But it completely ignores so looking at the mental model or the mental body, like our brain only, it ignores your emotional body, it ignores your physical body, it ignores your energetic body, it ignores your spiritual body. And you can't heal unless you are addressing all of those layers of you. I did 6 years to become qualified as a psychologist. In every single year, we studied statistics, statistical research methods. That was the main subject that we had to do well in. And some people feel really supported by a label. They feel like their experiences have become validated, which to an extent is okay, but on some level or after a certain point in time, you need to realize that there are root causes and there's underlying things happening. And I don't know, I want to say it's at a soul level, but I don't want to. It's all about like your soul, really. So I think that I'm here to contribute to the rise of this feminine energy and also to contribute to the integration between the feminine and the masculine. Within that, I'm here to hold space for the taboo topics, to be vulnerable and to be truthful, to show other women and other men that it's okay and it's safe to speak up and to own what happened in their lives. I love facilitating groups. I love the connection between other people. So doing group work and holding circles is something that I really enjoy, and also really love talking, and I'd love to talk more on anything, all of the taboo stuff, anything that needs to be talked about. So there's 2 reasons why I choose to be vulnerable. The first is because when we are vulnerable enough to show what's really happened to us or what we really feel or what we really think, we are stepping into our truth. We're another step towards connecting with ourselves. We're another step towards healing. And the second reason is because if I can show you that I can do it, then it gives you space for you to do it. It feels uncomfortable when I think about doing it. When I actually do it, I find it incredibly liberating and incredibly healing. Sometimes I feel like I might have overshared or I might have shocked people, and I just choose to sit in that discomfort because I know that my intention in sharing is pure, and I know that it can have benefit. And if it makes someone uncomfortable or if it makes somebody angry or sad, then those feelings and emotions are still okay. That's an okay experience for them to have. And I just have to choose to be okay with that. Everything always comes back to the masculine and the feminine energies with me, but a more beautiful world would be the integration of the masculine and the feminine. And that would mean connection with ourselves, like true connection with ourselves. It would mean true connection with each other, and it would mean connection with Mother Earth and all the sentient beings on Earth. What brings me hope is the cracks of vulnerability that I see in people. When people start to expose themselves and speak their truth, then you see the rawness and the beauty inside of an individual. And when we start to own all of that, that brings me hope, because I just see that it's people stepping into their power. I think that when you're present, when you're fully present in yourself, everything can bring you joy. Everything. Oh, and I just really wish that everybody knew how beautiful they were.